Welcome to this explainer where we're digging into Freakonomics. This is a book that basically turns everything you thought you knew upside down, and it reveals the hidden incentives that really drive the world. It's all about seeing what's actually going on just beneath the surface. Okay, so let's just dive right in with a question that sounds completely ridiculous, like the start of a terrible joke. But trust me, the answer unlocks a whole new way of thinking about things. Stick with me because this reveals something huge about how our world really works. So this isn't just some clever riddle. It's really an invitation to start looking at the world like an economist. And no, I'm not talking about the boring kind with endless charts and graphs you might have slept through in school. I'm talking about a method for figuring out how people actually get what they want. The core idea in Freakonomics is that the modern world isn't nearly as confusing as it seems. If we just learn how to tune out all the surface-level noise and start asking the right kind of questions, even the most tangled-up situations can start to make perfect sense. So how in the world do you even begin to answer a question like that? Well, the authors give us a really simple but incredibly powerful framework for thinking. Okay, so this three-step toolkit, this is basically the engine that drives the entire book. It's a pretty simple process. First, figure out the incentives. Second, question the story everyone accepts as true. And third, follow the data. It's a method you can apply to just about anything. So let's see how it works in action. All right, let's circle back to that totally bizarre question we started with. And let's begin with the Ku Klux Klan. What was the true source of their power? So back in the 1940s, the Klan was having this big, scary revival. Their reputation was built on pure fear, and the conventional wisdom was pretty straightforward. Their power came directly from their horrifying acts of violence. But then you look at the data, and the story gets a lot more complicated. As awful as these acts were, the numbers were actually dropping, and dropping dramatically, even while Klan membership was spiking. So this tells us something huge. Their real power had to be coming from somewhere else. The story everyone believed, it was just plain wrong. You see, the Klan was built on secrets. They had secret handshakes, ridiculous passwords, and all these mysterious titles. And all this secrecy created this aura of power, making them seem way bigger and more organized than they really were. Their true advantage wasn't just violence, it was the information they kept locked away. So this is where a guy named Stetson Kennedy comes into the picture. He was an activist who went undercover inside the Klan, and he had this brilliant realization. He figured out that their greatest strength, all that secrecy, was also their biggest weakness. If you could just expose their secrets, you could take away all their power. And his plan was absolutely genius. He started leaking all the Klan's secret passwords and rituals to the producers of the Superman radio show. So suddenly, kids all across America are listening to Superman battle this thinly veiled version of the Klan, and he's using their own secret codes against them on the air. The organization that got its power from fear became a national laughingstock. I mean, kids were literally playing games on the playground using the Klan's secret codes. Kennedy didn't defeat them with force, he just stripped away their informational advantage and made them look silly. Okay, so that's the Klan. But what on earth does any of this have to do with real estate agents? It sounds crazy, but the connection is actually pretty profound. Just like the Klan, real estate agents get a huge amount of their power because they have an informational advantage. There's actually a term for this. Economists call it information asymmetry. So how does this actually play out in the real world? It's simple. Your real estate agent knows way more than you do about the true value of your house, what the local market is doing, and what potential buyers are really thinking. You have to put your trust in them, and that trust is what gives them the power in the deal. Now let's follow the incentives. So look at these numbers. If your agent works their tail off to get you an extra 10 grand for your house, you get almost all of that. But them? They might only see an extra $150. So you gotta ask, is that tiny reward really worth weeks of extra work and hassle? Well, the data says probably not. In fact, studies show that when agents sell their own homes, they leave them on the market longer and get a price that's about 3% higher on average. Why? Because when it's their own money on the line, the incentive is a whole lot stronger. So this economic way of thinking doesn't just apply to these two, weirdly connected groups. Once you have the toolkit, you can start to see the hidden side of pretty much everything. Thanks to movies and TV, we have this image of drug dealers living these super glamorous, high-rolling lives. But you guessed it, the conventional wisdom is wrong again. A sociologist actually managed to get his hands on the detailed financial books of a Chicago drug gang, and the numbers tell a very, very different story. Yeah, you heard that right. The gang's financial records showed that the average street-level dealer, the foot soldier, was making just $3.30 an hour. That's way below minimum wage. It turns out a drug gang is structured a lot like a major corporation, you know? The people at the bottom do all the dangerous work for terrible pay, while a few executives at the very top make a fortune. The incentive for the foot soldiers is basically a lottery ticket, that tiny chance that one day they might make it to the top. And the same focus on incentives can uncover cheating in the most unexpected places. Take school teachers, for example. When Chicago introduced a high-stakes testing policy that tied teacher pay to how well their students scored, a really clever algorithm found something pretty startling: evidence of cheating by teachers in about 5% of all classrooms. And what about the super honorable world of sumo wrestling? Well, the data there reveals a fascinating pattern. So a wrestler who's on the bubble with a 7-7 record desperately needs one more win to keep his ranking. When he faces an opponent who's already safe and has nothing to lose, statistics say he should win less than 50% of the time. But, as this chart shows, he actually wins almost 80% of the time. The data's practically screaming that a deal has been struck, because the incentive for the other guy to just throw the match is incredibly high. So look, these stories are fascinating, but the real takeaway here is the method itself. This is a toolkit that you can use. Question the stories that you're always told. Always look for the underlying incentive. Ask yourself who gains from this, and then try to find the data, because the real story is almost always hiding in the numbers. Once you start looking at the world this way, asking the right questions, analyzing incentives, and following the data, you'll start to see the hidden side of absolutely everything around you. The world is a lot more interesting than it appears on the surface. So what conventional wisdom in your own life is just waiting to be overturned?